For Soviet armored forces in 1940, the T-34 medium tank was a massive leap forward in capability. Prior Soviet tanks, for the most part, fell under two extremes. Either they were nimble and lightly armored, or they were heavy and relatively sluggish. The T-34 is the ideal bridge between these two extremes, being well armed, mobile, and well protected while also being relatively small and light. This set a precedent that would define Soviet tank designs for decades to come. Though it was a huge advancement, it also had some fairly large flaws. Flaws which Soviet engineers pretty much immediately recognized. The vertically sloping sides combined with the Christie suspension system reduced interior space, while the two-man turret led to crew overload. Several designs such as the T-34M and T-43 sought to correct these issues, though ultimately they wouldn't go anywhere. With World War II now in full swing, the Soviet Union simply could not afford to introduce such massive changes to their production lines. That, and both the T-34M and T-43 were actually not that much better than the T-34 anyway. More gradual improvements were made to the T-34's design, though as the tide of the war turned, the Soviets began to seriously investigate replacing the T-34. The primary hurdle in such a task was proofing the tank against 88mm shells while still keeping weight to a minimum. One engineer, Alexander Morozov, had a rather novel solution. By mounting the engine transversely, i.e. sideways, a lot of space and therefore weight could be saved. These savings could then be spent thickening the armor. This eventually resulted in the T-44, though it wasn't produced on a massive scale for a few reasons. For one thing, since it had the same gun as the T-34, it offered no significant firepower advantage. Second, the tank was experiencing a lot of significant teething issues. Since the Soviets wanted to keep the T-44's design a secret, none were deployed in combat. In order to remedy the firepower problem, the 100mm D-10T cannon was mounted in a T-44 for testing. Though there were a lot of areas that needed improvement before it could be considered viable, the concept was generally sound. With an order for a new tank based off this work submitted, Morozov and his team got to work. This new tank was designated the T-54. A number of specifications were laid out, including thickening the front plate to 120mm, providing the turret with electric traverse, increasing internal space, and putting an AA machine gun on the rear of the turret. In January of 1945, the first T-54 prototype was delivered for testing. In April, the results came back. Though the results were positive overall, there is also some criticism. A portion of the report states, the primary shortcoming of the T-54 tank relates to the insufficient penetration resistance of the turret and the obsolete design of the transmission and running gear, which is unacceptable for a modern tank. The turret can be damaged at long ranges, and the transmission and running gear reduce the dynamic qualities of the tank. The report also listed a number of changes that should be applied, including an IS-3 type turret, M4 Sherman-style vision devices for the commander, and a conventional drive sprocket. Later, it was requested that Sherman-style gunner controls and a stabilizer be fitted as well. In 1946, a revised T-54 was submitted and accepted for service, though it was missing quite a few of the wishlist items that had been stipulated. Although it was accepted for service, it was agreed that the tank would not enter production until further changes had been made. Following further development, the T-54 entered full production in 1947, though it still had a number of faults, the largest of which was the shape of the turret. Lower portions on the front and rear of the turret presented shot traps, areas where shells could ricochet down to the whole roof. In 1949, the frontal shot trap was eliminated, with the rear shot trap being fixed in 1951. The thickness of the upper front plate was also reduced. A number of other issues on the 1947 model included disintegrating gearboxes, snapping torsion bars, and problems with the engine filter. Production of the T-54 was halted until 1949. The T-54A variant would see the tank fitted with a vertical stabilizer, fume extractor for the gun, and night vision for the driver. This was followed by the T-54B, which had a dual-axis stabilizer and night vision for the gunner and commander. After Leonid Kartsev was promoted chief designer at the Nizhny Tagil plant, the T-54B's design was improved and streamlined for production. This was called the T-55. The T-55A variant, which I'm sure most people are familiar with, added enhanced NBC capability to the tank. The T-55 would go on to claim the title of the most produced tank in history, with the tank still being actively used in combat to this day. Though it was troubled initially, it's one of the greatest tank designs ever created. It was relatively simple, got the job done, and was widely distributed on a scale that still hasn't been seen since then. Used in dozens of wars and conflicts since its creation, the T-55 has certainly proved its worth. That's about all there is to say really. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.